Dear friends, hello, my name is Enric Sala. I am a National Geographic Explorer in residence, and I have been working for the last 30 years on the protection of the ocean with scientific research, economic analysis, storytelling, policy work, education, and also helping to develop sustainable ocean economies on the coastal area. In 2008, I founded National Geographic Pristine Seas, which is a project working with local communities and governments to create large marine protected areas around the world. And my friend Alon asked me to talk about the business case for marine protected areas and conservation of the ocean today. This is what I do. Usually when I go to a country and I speak with the country leaders, they have four main questions. The first one is, why do we need marine protected areas? Can we just manage our activities in the ocean sustainably? Do we really need to protect places, exclude people from some areas? The second question, once they understand that yes, we do need marine protected areas, is, well, how much of the ocean we need to protect? The third question is, where should these protected areas be? And the fourth and final question, usually coming from the Minister of Finance, is how much is this going to cost me? I'm going to try to answer these four questions briefly today. The first one is, why do we need marine protected areas? Well, the main reason is because we have been depleting ocean life across the world for a long time. Since the start of industrial fishing, actually after the Second World War. Fisheries globally have been declining since the mid-90s. We reached peak fish 25 years ago. Today, over 3/4 of the fish stocks are overfished, meaning we are taking them out of the water faster than they can reproduce. So this is like having a bank account where everybody withdraws and nobody makes a deposit. You don't need to be a banker to know what's going to happen to this bank account. We are going to deplete it. Now Israel has an opportunity. Because what we have seen around the world is that marine protected areas can restore marine life and produce many more benefits to people. We know that when we close an area to fishing, mining, drilling, and other damaging activities, the abundance of fish increases by 600% compared to unprotected areas nearby. 600%. On average. Because when you don't kill the fish, they take a longer time to die, they grow larger, they reproduce more, and we know that the large females produce a disproportionately larger number of eggs, which together with the spillover of adult fish help to replenish the areas around. This is why it's so important to work on no-take marine reserves. Also, knowing that the large fish have an extraordinary potential for regenerating the rest of the ocean means that we also should keep the big fish in the water. And we hear this argument that we have to allow commercial fishing or recreational fishing inside marine protected areas because that provides a balance. Well, today there is no balance because 97% of the ocean is open to fishing. Less than 3% of the ocean is fully protected from us, from our activities. So we have examples from marine protected areas that allow commercial fishing within their boundaries all over the world. And they do not work because they are based on the illusion that we can fish sustainably. Well, we have very few examples of sustainable fisheries, and we have almost none in the Mediterranean Sea. And we have none for Israel. So if we fully protect areas, we are going to get more benefits, not only for marine life, but also for the fisheries around. A new study looking at all protected areas around Australia found that the partially protected areas that allow fishing within their boundaries, have no benefits for people or for the economy. that are different from the areas that are unprotected. So these areas that allow commercial fishing are based on the illusion of protection, and they are actually counterproductive because they suck limited resources of public funding to manage these areas for no additional benefit. So it is very clear that we are talking about no-take marine reserves. We have examples from hundreds of marine reserves around the world, and the evidence is very clear. So that argument that we cannot protect more because we need to fish more is a fallacy. It's a myth. And the science dispels this myth very clearly. And not only the local fishing benefits, but also the tourism industry. Because people go where the fish are. Israel is not known as a diving destination. Who says, oh, I'm going to go to the Mediterranean coast of Israel for my diving vacation? No, they go to the Medes Islands in Spain, where I'm from, or Cabo de Palos, because this is where the fish are, no-take areas with a humongous abundance of fish. In every dive, you can see 30, 40 large groupers. It's amazing what you can see in these places. And the tourism benefits are extraordinary, and I'll talk about that a little later. So now that when people are confronted with the facts, the science, the evidence that we do need marine protected areas to reverse the destruction of the ocean and to restore not only the areas within the boundaries of the reserves, but also help to replenish the areas around, the question is, how much do we need? We just published a month ago our latest research in the scientific journal Nature, which shows that we should protect a minimum of 30% of the ocean if we are to obtain multiple benefits. And the main benefits are, first, recovery, restoration of marine life, as we have shown, 600% increase in the abundance of fish, restoration of entire ecosystems, and all the services they provide to us, to humanity. And just as an example of services is the role that intact seagrass beds that are not trolled, that are left intact, have to protect the coastal area from the destruction, from the erosion, from the waves. In areas where we have intact seagrass beds, we don't have problems with having to regenerate beaches. In places where those seagrass beds have been destroyed by trawling or by dredging, we have these huge problems where we are losing sand from the beaches. And we get to the crazy situation where we are dredging the sand in seagrass beds to replenish beaches. So we are just getting into this feedback loop, that is this vortex of destruction. So it is very clear that the more marine biodiversity we have, the more benefits we get from it. So at least 30% will give us a recovery of marine biodiversity and all the benefits it provides to humanity. 2, it will get us more fish, as I mentioned before, because of this spillover effect. And if we were able to close the right areas, we would be able to have a net gain in fish catch, because the spillover from these areas exceeds the foregone catch by closing them. So these areas, unlike the 97% of the ocean that today is open to fishing, are like investment accounts with a principal that we set aside that grows with compound interest, that 600% increase, and returns that we can enjoy. But also, the third benefit is for climate, because we found on our paper that bottom trawling, plowing the seafloor with huge and heavy nets, disturbs enormous amounts of the sediment. That actually you can see the plumes of sediment created by bottom trawlers from satellite photos. So much of this sediment is remineralized to carbon dioxide, which, as you know, is a greenhouse gas that can stay in the atmosphere for 1,000 years. So we were able to calculate that the emissions of CO2 into the water created by this disturbance of the bottom by bottom trawling are larger than Germany's. They are larger than Israel's. They are larger than most countries. They are even larger than the CO2 emissions of aviation globally every year. So protecting the seafloor and reducing the amount of bottom trawling is going to help us mitigate climate change too. So we have these three benefits of at least 30% protection: biodiversity, food, and climate. Now, where should these areas be? Ecologists know very clear where these areas should be. They should be in the areas with more biodiversity, in the rocky bottoms that harbor more biomass, more abundance of life, but also the places that are the nurseries for many of these species, like the seagrass bed, for example, or areas where the groupers aggregate to spawn. And we have already enough information to know where to place these areas in most countries. And finally, the final question, which is key, which is probably the main roadblock for making a decision of whether to invest in protected areas or not, which is how much is this going to cost? Well, today, the world spends more on ice cream than on ocean protection. The cost of protecting 30% of the ocean would be less than the money that the governments spend to subsidize the destructing fishing practices. So we do have the money, but we use it to prop up the industries that destroy the ocean instead of preserving it. The benefits far outweigh the costs. In Australia, for example, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, of which a third is fully protected in Nordic areas, supports 56,000 jobs and brings in $5 billion to the Australian economy before COVID through ecotourism. That's 35 times more revenue than that provided by the Australian fishing industry in that region. Where I come from Catalonia and the Mediterranean coast of Spain, the Medes Islands Marine Reserve. It's a small reserve, but it's a no-take area, and it has one of the largest abundance of fish in the Mediterranean, including the large groupers, groupers that are 1.2 meters long. And they reproduce year after year after year, and producing all these eggs and babies that help to replenish the areas around. So the Medes Islands Marine Reserve, the management of the Marine Reserve is only €500,000 per year. But it produces an economic revenue of 12 million every year and supports hundreds of jobs in that coastal village. Now imagine if every coastal town in the Mediterranean had a no-take marine reserve that is large enough that would attract tourism. Not only we would have new economic opportunities and increase economic revenue, but also that would help replenish the areas around. And we have seen that on average around the world, for every dollar invested in marine protected areas, that generates $10 in economic outputs. But of course, tourism has to be regulated well. We cannot have too many people destroying the things that they are going to see. So more and larger no-take reserves would have multiple benefits for Israel. The science and the economics are very clear. No-take areas benefit marine life, people, and the economy. So Israel now has an extraordinary opportunity to regenerate its sea and coastal economies, or continue along a path of degradation. I know you will do the right thing. Thank you very much.